Hi, everybody. My name is Belinda Greenfield. I work with New York State Office of Addiction Services and Supports. And I work with OASIS as the New York State Opioid Treatment Authority, or what's called the SOTA, SOTA, not the soda you drink, as well as I'm the Bureau Director of Adult Treatment Services. I'm actually here to talk with you a little bit about medication assisted treatment, or the acronym is MAT or MAT options, because there's a lot of misinformation about what is medication assisted treatment and is it right for myself or my loved one, a family member, a friend. Is this something that is a good thing for a person as part of their substance use disorder recovery process? So hopefully I can try to, give you some information and maybe allay some of the fears and that misinformation out there around MAT. That's my hope for today. So, just to give you a sense of one really, really important piece that I always like to land on when I talk about medication assisted treatment options is that medication assisted treatment options are just a piece of the entire possibilities that someone could benefit from treatment services with. So, there's definitely counseling services that we know about, individual counseling, as well as group counseling services. There may be other aspects of services like vocational rehabilitation counseling, nutritional counseling and services. Anything that sort of is a holistic approach to care is what we really advocate for, that meets people's needs and meets people where they're at. And medications can really be useful in helping people to no longer use or reduce their use, and to basically, kind of help people along their recovery journey. But, why do medications work, and what is the benefits to using a medication? Well, there's a couple of things that we really talk a lot about in support of the use of addiction medications or medication assisted treatment options, when thinking about what is the best treatment plan and recovery plan for somebody that is using and wants to stop or reduce use. So one of the biggies is that addiction medications really work wonderfully in treating withdrawal. So withdrawal are those, really uncomfortable symptoms that oftentimes are reasons why people continue using. Some of those symptoms could be sweating, they could be, a sense of irritability, almost feeling uncomfortable in your own skin. Is sometimes what people say when they're experiencing withdrawal symptoms. Addiction medications basically help reduce and stop those symptoms, and it makes it easier than to stop the use and abuse of substances. Another part of that is what we talk about as craving. Addiction medications help with craving, that insatiable need, that overwhelming compulsion to continue using. It's sometimes hard, even with just counseling alone, to stop use or reduce use. The need is so great, and that's oftentimes why people also continue use or at times go back to use. The use of addiction medications are a wonderful asset and a wonderful option in trying to kind of help with that craving management. So if we think about that, individuals, if they are benefiting from an addiction medication or medication assisted treatment option, have their withdrawal symptoms managed and their cravings managed, what happens? They wind up staying in treatment. And that's a good thing. We don't want people to leave care unless they want to. But oftentimes people don't stay in treatment if they're continuing to use. They feel maybe ashamed, maybe struggle with the fact that they aren't able to manage it, and they leave care. And what we want to be able to do is we want to keep people in treatment and working on their recovery goals. So essentially, the use of medication assisted treatment helps individuals stay in care. Treatment medications help the brain essentially adapt gradually to the absence of the abused drug. It basically staves off those drug cravings, and sometimes I even say it has a calming effect in regards to body systems, and it helps people be able to focus on counseling and on their overall recovery goals. And essentially, then what happens is we're able to prevent relapse. And essentially, we know that science has taught us that stress and that cues linked to drug use, the people, places, things, aspect of what winds up, unfortunately, sometimes leading people to continue or to reuse again. These are often the triggers for relapse. So medications basically help interfere with those triggers, and it helps people then to be able to sustain recovery. Um, we acknowledge that there are oftentimes changes in brain chemistry, and so basically drugs of abuse, they impact the brain chemistry and structure. This is kind of what keeps people also using. So medications, specifically neurotransmitters and associated receptors that are responsible for the everyday functions and are typically altered by drug use. The medication assisted treatment basically helps to address those type of changes, which do produce withdrawal, do unfortunately produce that insatiable craving and need to continue to use. And medications assisted treatment can then help to change the course in regards to a person's staying in care and feeling that relief from craving and withdrawal. Um, there's lots of different medication assisted treatment options. The ones that we oftentimes talk about in regards to classes of substance use disorders are three, and that's nicotine as one class, alcohol use disorder as a second, and then opioid use disorders as a third. Um, I'm going to throw out some names to you. This is more for reference. These may be things for you to hear about in other presentations or to learn more about on your own. But some examples, for instance, in managing nicotine use as a medication-assisted treatment option. They're varenicline or Chantix. We often see those commercials in regards to varenicline as a medication-assisted treatment option. NRTs or nicotine replacement therapies is a second, and bupropion or Wellbutrin is a third. When we talk about alcohol use disorder, acamprosate is a medication that's really been found useful, naltrexone and disulfiram or antabuse. And then regarding opioid use disorders, we have naltrexone again, buprenorphine, as well as methadone. And these are great tried and true medications that have tremendous scientific backing behind them. But there's a lot of myths associated with the use of medication assisted treatment. And sometimes those myths almost get ahead of the science and get ahead of the actual knowledge of the benefits. And we hear these misconceptions and these myths associated with the use of medications. And that's what oftentimes interferes with people thinking that it would be a possible benefit to them in their recovery. And as family members, as loved ones, we may even feel that these myths and misinformation are real. And we may then not recommend a medication assisted treatment option for our loved one, even though that would be the best thing for the individual. So Just thinking about some of those myths. We hear myths about that, medication-assisted treatment. If you're on a medication-assisted treatment option, you can't drive a car. You're not able to work. You will look high or feel high or seem sedated or intoxicated. That medication-assisted treatment options are not meant to be long-term. These are all fallacies. These are not truths. The idea of the use of a medication assisted treatment, for example, as a potential long term option is definitely, it is meant to be long term. It could also be short term. It really is about a person centered approach to care. So, one individual may need to only be on a medication assisted treatment option for maybe a few months, and they wind up feeling fine when they are tapering off that medication, and they don't no longer experience cravings. They do not experience withdrawal symptoms, and they feel fine, and then they can continue on their recovery path. But some other individuals, it's not going to work for them for that short term. Some people do need longer term treatment on a medication assisted treatment option, and some people may even need it lifelong. So, what I always advocate for is for the person listening to me right now and listening to other times when I've talked about medication assisted treatment options is it needs to be person centered, person driven. Just because one person looks one way and is able to, not need a medication assisted treatment option or needs it for shorter term or longer term, there's no right way. There's only the way that works for the individual. And that is so important when we're thinking about the addiction treatment process. But like I said, there's so many different myths and information out there that is untrue, that the stigma associated oftentimes with just struggling with a substance use disorder, then coupled with the use of an addiction medication, that can cause people to maybe make decisions that are not in their best interests. What I oftentimes like to compare the use of a medication assisted treatment option in treating substance use disorder is thinking about the use of medications in treating other medical conditions like asthma, diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure. We use medications oftentimes for a variety of different medications, and sometimes those medications are needed long term or even lifelong. But we may not question that there is a benefit to somebody being on a high blood pressure medication. So why do we question it when somebody that is working on their recovery may benefit from and need a medication in order to support their recovery goals? We shouldn't do that. That's stigma. That's that aspect of that we are providing information that is inaccurate, and we want to support people in their recovery path, and we want to be able to bring all those tools to bear in helping that person along in their treatment and recovery journey. um, Sometimes also, if I can use as an example, and I mentioned methadone earlier in regards to opioid use disorder. Methadone, or what we may be familiar with as methadone clinics or OTP services, that's a particular type of substance use disorder treatment program that does specifically utilize methadone as a way of helping people that are struggling with opioid use to not experience craving and withdrawal and to be able to stop using opioids. But again, there's so much misinformation out there. So the idea of not telling people don't take a medication assisted treatment option, or telling people, oh no, don't go to a methadone clinic. We want to be able to open the availability of all of those possible options to them, and that it does include medication assisted treatment as a viable treatment and recovery path. So when thinking about medication assisted treatment, I want to land on what I said right at the beginning. It's a piece of the entire gamut of treatment and recovery services. So addiction medications are a part of the treatment process and include not only addiction medications, MAT options, but physical health medications as well as mental health medication. It's about counseling services, those individual and group counseling services. It's about peer support services. So all of that gets wrapped in the participation in 12-step programs, and just in general, the robust comprehensive care options that substance use disorder treatment and recovery services provide. We want to be able to access all of those. And I think I'm going to land on this. And this was something that a prior medical director at Oasis shared, which I really love the statement. And I think it's kind of a meaningful conclusion to what I'm sharing with you today. And it basically is that addiction medications are for the brain, but 12 steps are for the soul. Or in essence, it's just a component of and helps to address brain chemistry and brain chemistry dysfunction, but it's just a piece of the whole treatment and recovery process. So I hope I've addressed some of your questions and concerns, or at least started you on a path of learning more about medication assisted treatment options. I thank you so much for your time today, and good luck and be well. And thanks for all you do.